But when we think about those organizational goals, then we start making decisions in the budget. And one of the key things that's misinterpreted about budgets is, again, it's thought of as numbers, but really what it is, it's about actions, it's about people working, it's about decisions that make a difference to people's lives. And so we want to make sure we have linkage to that as we develop this budget. The third thing that's very important from a principal perspective is evidence-based decisions. And so as we move forward, and this is going to be something we're really going to talk about when we talk about capital tonight, but again, it is very important on the operating side as well, is that when we make decisions, we want to think about, well, what's the evidence that backs that up? What is it? Why do we have to fix up this road? Why do we want to maybe maintain our recreation facilities or start working on those? Why do we want to maybe invest in fire services? Whatever it might be, we have to have evidence to basically make our decisions, because one of the key things you want to consider is that this is the public purse that we're talking about. And I take that very seriously. It's taxpayer dollars. And our customers expect us to make good decisions for them, and they trust us. But we have to earn that trust through, again, making sure that we make decisions that are based on data, on priorities, on doing the right things for our community. Okay. The next thing, again, is from a budget principle perspective is priorities. Again, so we want to make sure that we don't lose focus on what is important and not important from a departmental perspective. And so, as counselors, and some of you are new and some of you have been around for a while, it really comes down to understanding that each department, in a sense, is a reflection of services that are delivered each and every day. Recreation are people cutting grass and opening up the rec facilities. Public Works are people filling in potholes and painting lines on the streets, looking at public safety. Policing is taking care of, again, protection of people within our community. So when it comes down to it, what we really need you as elected officials to consider is what's important for the community. And one of the key things is often, as I've worked with counselors and elected officials over 30 years in my time in this business, often elected officials ask about, well, what about the public engagement piece of budget? And what about what the people want? And I say the most important part of public engagement for budgeting is an election. You knocked on doors, you talked to people, you ran on platforms. And so I have to say the most important reflection of the public is basically the thoughts that are on this council. And I respect that very much. And so that's what kind of excites me about budgets, is hearing what councils have to think, because you're the ones who make a difference in communities, but you have to do that through priorities. One of the key things about budget principles is priorities is also required because we have limited dollars. That is the reality of municipal government. If we had unlimited funds, we would, have a rec facility on every corner. We would have new fire halls in every corner. We would have, public transit for everybody. We would have all types of services that would be, a utopia, right? But that's not the reality of municipal government. So it really comes down to understanding that we have limitations, but that doesn't mean that we can't do special things if we understand priorities and make good decisions. The next thing that's an important principle as we move along is outcome focus. So basically, as we make decisions, what are we going to be looking at from an outcome perspective? Not just dollars spent, but what does this mean in terms of actions, in terms of actual services that we're going to be providing? And so as we start making decisions about dollars, think about what does that mean in terms of the rubber hitting the road. And that means basically in both if we're going to add things and if we're going to subtract things. Not everything is important to everybody. And one of the key things I look at when I'm, making budget decisions and working with councils is considering we can't please everybody, but can we do something that would please the community on the whole? And there's always going to be, I hate to say it in our business, the loud Facebook warriors that are upset about decisions that are made by council. But the key here is basically what outcomes can we facilitate through the budget process that will make our community better for the majority of the people that live here. That doesn't mean that there aren't going to be things that are important for certain groups. That's absolutely a big part of making decisions as well. But we have to focus on outcomes to have a successful budget. The final thing, and again, this is one that's really key and important, is basically transparency. And so, So in this budget, you're going to find the person who's online tonight, Ed, did a great job in going through the details and understanding the differences year to year from a change perspective. And so we'll speak about those things. We're also going to make sure that we provide a document at the end of this budget process that will provide yourselves and your public with a very, very strong understanding of what this budget means, what changed, why, and how this ties into your short-term priorities, basically 2026, and the long-term priorities that we have as well. So we're going to be writing a budget document for you that will be kind of the culmination of this process overall. So that's the key to principles, and that's how this budget was built. Now, one of the things that's very important to note is that this budget was built on priorities, and it was built using consistent priority review criteria. We looked at all 7 departments, and I will say this, it is very important to note that when Viv brought us on, she was pretty strong in her direction to us that she felt that this budget and the document and the way that things were done needed a rebuild. And when we looked at it, we agreed. You know, and I can't stress this part enough. When it comes down to rebuilding a budget and looking at the details and spreadsheets and things that may bore you, it is always our goal to make sure that we can provide the council with information so they can make good decisions. That's what we're here for, 100%. And so when we built this budget, it was to ensure that information was transparent, to make sure that data was correct, to make sure that we were putting ourselves in a position to look at actual spending, to make sure that we were using tax dollars properly, to make sure that departments were properly aligned and so that we could explain departments and services properly to you as council. So there was a lot of work put into this. Now, I'm very happy to say that I'm not the one who did all that work. It was Ed, but it was a lot of work. And Ed, if you're online now, we did talk about this earlier today. Do you have any comments to this, Ed? Because you did all the work, and I know that there was a lot of detail, but can you maybe give council a little bit of some insights as to the work that you had to complete to get this to where we are today?
Yeah, sure, Tim.
There he is.
Yeah, it was a lot of, I guess, data digging. You know, Romer was able to provide a lot of good data, but had to sort through it, sift through it, and you know, I used kind of a materiality basis where, and looked at run rates or averages, if you want, and try and identify the critical areas that we needed to focus on. And from there, I was able to direct Romer and the team to look at certain areas, and I think you'll see the results in the budget. A lot of those changes came through.
Um, I think one of the key things here is we're looking at this as a bit of a change year for you as council. We're really trying to serve you properly, again, in terms of cleaning up the data, making sure we did a good review of actuals, and you're going to see some great outcomes because of that, and making sure we're setting you up for success in terms of priorities. I will say this, though, as well, is that budget processes are a process, and sometimes they take time to repair. And so we're here to work with you over the coming weeks to make sure that this budget is what you want as a council and it meets your needs, but also that we're looking at this in the long term, basically in terms of process for better decision making, better use of our finances, and setting you up for success for good decision making into the future. And so we're really looking forward to this change, but also recognizing that there's still going to be a lot of work to be done over the coming months and probably years. So very important to note, again, this is just kind of a high level perspective, is that I do believe as elected officials and for our public, and I'm sure that there's at least half the public are watching this right now, I'm sure. Kidding, of course, I know how important budget meetings are. But all kidding aside, it is important to note that municipal government, to me, I believe is the most important level of government because we provide services every day that people get to actually really enjoy and need. But we're also most limited in relationship to our ability to generate revenue. We have basically certain tools, property taxes, number one by far, fees and charges, utility rates, fees and charges, permits, rentals, leases, returns on investment. That looks like a long list. But the only real strong financial resource we have for generating income is property tax. And that limits us compared to other levels of government. And that's very important to note. One of the biggest advantages they have is that if you are an employee working for somewhere and you get a raise, you automatically pay more tax. And they have a multitude of different taxes that they have an ability to generate. And so I'd say provincial levels and federal levels of government have significant advantages over us. And I think that's just important to note. And again, I'm putting information out there for you because you're the ones who get stopped in the grocery stores and ask, well, why my property taxes go up? And it's very important to note from a fundamental educational perspective is that property taxes is really, in a sense, probably 80 to 90% of our ability to generate revenues from municipalities, and it makes it very difficult. So the budget at a glance. One of the things I think it's a real testament to the work that Ed did and the work that your administration team did. And I'll say this: the work and the pressure Viv put on us, which was fantastic. We're very happy to say that the work that Ed did, which was an extensive review of actuals, was an extensive review of your departments from a priority and threshold perspective. We're actually presenting a budget, a reduction in basically taxes this year. We had a significant expenditure reduction because of what we saw as, I don't want to say inflated, but spending that was over budgeted in the last number of years. And so when we went through the data, compared it to actuals, looked at priorities, we were confident that certain areas could be reduced significantly, and that resulted in a net budget savings for this municipality. And so in a sense, we're tightening the belt, but that doesn't mean that we don't have opportunity. Because of this tightening, that resulted in over $2 million being contributed to reserves, which is a very, very positive situation for the town. Now, that said, it's also important to note that as we look at this, we look at tax decreases and we look at the opportunity that it presented in terms of also being able to put $2 million into reserve. We also have a situation where I listened to this council very, very closely at the last council meeting, and what I heard is this is a council that wants to see things get done. You want to see high level become a special community. You want to see investment in capital. You want to see maybe better services where it might be. So we're trying to set the table with a financial strength and some commitment and also some responsibility and accountability that will set you up for that success in the long term. I can't stress enough, municipal finance is an area that you can get yourself into trouble very quickly with bad decisions. So we want to make sure that this budget is strong, that we set you up strong financially and with the great fundamentals, and you have a strong financial foundation. But also, we could get ourselves into trouble very quickly if we're not very diligent and very disciplined in the way that we use that money going forward. And so we're setting you up for that success in this budget. Where the savings came from, on the most part, consultant and professional services was one of the biggest areas. Contracted maintenance and repair, special programs, maintenance and materials, equipment maintenance and replacement, software maintenance, and increased costs. There was increased costs, basically, which was essentially your salaries, utilities, and RCMP, and so that's offsetting things. So basically, this was, in a sense, a corrective budget. I mean, no disrespect to any of your staff, because again, it's they're a good team, and it's just a different way of looking at it because we're experts at this. But this basically was a budget of correction, a budget where we put the numbers into the right places and more aligned with what we're actually doing and more aligned with what we're actually spending. And so we have budget savings, but there are also areas that we saw that we needed to increase because that's the way you've been spending, basically. And so this budget is now, in my opinion, very correct according to the work that Ed did. So again, that resulted in a net savings of about $1 million, and that's about a 5.9% decrease versus your last year's budget. So very important to note. Lots of detail here, and if you want to go over this in detail, I can, but basically this gives you a snapshot of your revenues and a snapshot of your expenditures. The key thing here that is very important from a analytical perspective is, I will say that if we start looking at the fundamentals setting up for success in the long term, you have actually a very strong revenue base from a taxation perspective in that you have a significant amount of commercial and M&E. Basically because of your mills and your commercial buildings that are within your boundary. This gives you a strength that many urbans would really appreciate to have. That said, you also, from our forecast, have significant expenditures and repairs and maintenance and things like that, and to be done to your capital assets. That's probably going to use up a lot of that money in the future, and so we want to make sure that we temper expectations, right? We have to be very, very careful about, looking that we have a strong financial foundation without looking at the requirements that we have for those monies. We have a lot of capital assets that are aging. We have a lot of capital assets and wants in your capital projects that have not been moved on for years that council has deemed as important. We need to understand what priorities are, and we have to make the right decisions. And I can't stress this enough. I've seen municipalities do it. I'm working with one right now that's probably one that's in the news and everybody's heard of, the town of Gibbons, and we're there to help support them. Towns can get themselves in very big trouble very quickly without good decisions. And again, we want to make sure we set you up for success moving forward. I talk a lot, so I'm going to stop for a moment and just ask, is there any questions or thoughts or a pause or comments at all before I move on? Nothing? Okay, fantastic, okay.
Well, I just wanted to make the comment.
Sure.
I just want to say great work to everyone in administration, your team, because this is the best budget I've seen since I've sat on council now, and this is my 5th year looking at these, and I'll say amazing. Any of the questions that I had were basically answered, so.
We're just getting going, you wait. But I'm going to say,
Thank you.
It's all downhill from there if that's what you think now. I'm just kidding. Thank you so much for that. We really appreciate it. Again, I can't stress enough, your team was fantastic to work with as well, so thank you. Now, a couple of key things about the way that we approach this. One of the big things is we took a conservative revenue approach. This is critically important. And the reason this is important is when everybody likes to be, not conservative and be optimistic, but when we're not optimistic in municipal government, we make mistakes. So we're far better off, and again, budgets have to be balanced in municipal government. Again, it's under the legislation. So that means that if we are conservative in our revenues, we also have to be conservative in our expenses, which means we're right-sizing the expenses to essentially what we think we can spend and still be very safe. So that means that there could be potential for surpluses. And sometimes municipalities get criticized on occasion for running surpluses at year end. But I'll say this, in my 30 years of doing this, I worked for some of the best, and I had some great mentors over my time, and I'll never forget George Hybricks. He was the past president of Alberta GFOA, and he was my boss at Strathcona County. And he said to me, Tim, we get a lot of criticism for our surpluses, but just wait if we had one deficit. And that always hit me that it's very important that we run surpluses and we put that money away for good reasons, and that's why we're conservative in our revenues approaches, so council's aware. We made sure that provincial grants were not in the base budget. So again, we didn't want to overstate grants and made sure that one-time money is used for one-time things. And what that means is that this budget is not based on grants and potential grants that may or may not materialize. And so again, a very safe budget. So you have expenses that are based on real revenues that will be coming in. So again, very responsible. All of the consulting contracts were reviewed. This was very important and something I think you as council had brought up and you had concerns. It was what Viva told us about the way that contracted services had been spent. So our consulting expenses. So we went through this very, very with a fine tooth comb, or Ed did, and this is where we found a lot of savings. In a relationship to what we thought was, potential for basically the right consultants, the right way of spending things. And again, when we compared this to actuals, this was, again, a corrective area where we thought this is the right way to save some money. We also looked at, again, infrastructure safety. So when we looked at the capital budget, which I'll be showing you a little bit later, one of the key things that we talked with your team about, and I can't stress enough, we're at the beginning, not the end when it comes to capital. One of the things that we looked at from a priority perspective is there any projects that could cause a safety issue? Whether it be a road failure, bridge failure, a water failure, need for emergency services apparatus, whatever it might be. Safety is usually one of the pinnacle things that we have to consider when we're developing a budget. And so that was something that was very important as we reviewed this budget. The next one, again, professional development reviewed. Again, training budgets reviewed by department to match certification operational needs. And I will say this, municipalities that succeed are usually ones that invest in their people. And it's like any business. You want the best of the best. I was very fortunate in the municipality I started working in, which was, again, a place called Strathcona County. You may or may not have heard of it. But this was in like 98, and I can still remember them coming to me and saying, Tim, this was in my first week. We really appreciate your work. We think a lot of you, and we're going to send you to a conference. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I thought, wow, I get to go to a conference, and I've only been here a week. And they said, but we're hosting it, so go downstairs. You got to stuff the bags. So I didn't get to go anywhere. But all kidding aside, later in many years after working at that place, they actually did really show that they put their words where their mouth was when it came to leadership, and they invested in us. And so, when you put the time in with your team, and again, and the resources in for your team, professional development, you'll find it'll serve council very well and the community very well. And so that was something that we looked at in this budget. This is very dear to me because, again, my firm focuses on professional development, and we have offered a lot of our training to your team at no charge, just so that you're aware. So that is something that we'll be providing you and your team, is access to our online program at no charge for the year. So very important to kind of note. Finally, and I think this is one of the most important pieces, that this is a budget that's grounded in actual spending. One of the things that we did note in your past budgets is that there was a lot of variances when it came down to what was budgeted versus what we're actually doing. And so, when we have budgets like that, it makes it very difficult for councils to make decisions. It can make it very confusing when it comes down to reporting. And quite frankly, I don't think that we're very accountable from a performance management perspective in terms of what we're doing. Our job as administration is to be accountable to councils, to get things done for you. And if our budgets, again, are not grounded in reality, then the actions that are attached to the things that you're expecting us to do from a service perspective also aren't grounded in a reality. One of the key things, and again, I think it's very important for council to be aware of, is that when you pass a budget, that's the beginning, and then we're going to be reporting on that budget. But the reporting isn't just about money, it's about what are we getting done? What are we achieving? Are we keeping the town safe? Are we providing great recreation opportunity? Are we cutting the grass, on a timely basis? Are we getting things done that you expect? And that's the biggest interpretation of reporting that I would like to make sure that we speak about. But that is meaningless without basically having your budget grounded in actual spending. And so this budget is definitely reflected in what you actually spend. Okay. Moving along. So what are some of the risks and some of the opportunities? So risk considerations for this budget are, again, capital grants are not included in the operating base. And this is important. Some municipalities make mistakes on this, and I think you guys did a little bit. And the reason why you never want to have capital grants included in your operating base is capital grants are one-time money and should only be spent on one-time things. And again, I'm working for a municipality now that made a mistake in that regard, and have paid a big price on that now. And so this budget, again, is right-sized for the right revenues and matching to the right types of expenditures. Revenue, as I mentioned before, is conservative again, so actual performance could exceed budget. That means we could have surpluses, but that's a good thing. So we're being careful. We're being careful in this budget. Again, the town has low debt utilization. Again, so all the scheduled repayments are in the budget. We do have opportunity with debt, but I can't stress this enough. In today's world, capital's expensive. Debt can get used up very quickly. So though you have low debt utilization today, it doesn't take long with capital projects to use up debt. And so we want to be very careful when we make decisions in this regard, and we want to be very careful that it meets priorities. We get a big bang for our buck when we decide to take out debt on capital. I will say this, I'm not debt adverse. I'm somebody who basically, and I teach classes across the country on this, I'm somebody that says debt is a good thing for municipalities, believe it or not. And if it's used properly and used for the right things. Debt should never be used for maintenance. It shouldn't be used for operating costs. It should be used for projects that provide what I call legacy type of value to communities. Things that matter to people, things that have long-term effects, fire halls, recreation facilities, sometimes even road projects, whatever it might be that provides great value. Use it wisely, and debt again, pays off. So it's something to think about, but we got to be very careful on this. Assessment growth is also in the base. You guys are a growing community, and I have to say this. You may not know this, but, or maybe you do. We're shocked at the growth that you have. You actually have a very, very strong assessment growth base. You have a strong population growth. There are many urbans that I work with that would do anything to be in the position that you are in high level. But that also means that you're going to have cost pressure that's going to come along with that growth. People are going to expect services. It's going to require more infrastructure. It's going to require important decisions. It's an exciting time for high level, to be quite honest, but we want to make sure we plan this out right and we do the right things. And so this is kind of, like I said, we're setting you up with a foundation, but we want to recognize we want to take advantage of the advantages that we have. You are growing. That means more taxation dollars, but also means more cost. So we want to think that through. We have said that we need to look at a 5 to 10 year long-term financial plan. And so we're going to speak about that a little bit tonight, but this is again the beginning of that. And we want to make sure that we set you up with a good long-term capital plan that is prioritized, that has realistic funding, but also a long-term capital plan that can make council proud of building this community. What kinds of things can we get done from a capital perspective that would add value to this community? Now, that's tough because again, capital is very expensive, as I said, but we want to make sure that as we start to put that information in your hands, that over the coming weeks and again, probably months and maybe even years, we start making the right decisions so that high level becomes a very special place. Capital assets really do add to the value of a community. So the path forward is to receive the information tonight. Now I know that says adopt the operating budget, but really what it should say is for you to receive the information. Because again, tonight's not about decisions necessarily. Tonight's about receiving information and learning and having a dialogue together about how you feel about, you know, the process, about the information and what we can do to maybe make things better for you. You have time to ask us questions, I have to say that. We want to get some direction, possibly on the 5 to 10 year financial plan. Now again, like I said, I don't want to put that pressure on you this evening. We have time together. And like I said, though it's hard to get up here, I will come as much as you need me to because, you know, we're pretty invested in this. Viv has pushed us hard, and we like working with your team, and we believe in this municipality, and we think you have a great opportunity here because of your strong foundational from a finance perspective, but also because you're growing. And so this is a unique opportunity for you as high level. And so what do we want to be in 2 years, in 5 years, 10 years, and 20? We want to think about those things with you and then make this budget the beginning of that dream, I guess. We want to maybe look at, and this is parts of the long-term financial plan, look at your reserve policy. We want to plan for debt, so we want to look at your debt policy, and we want to make sure that we report regularly to council on budget performance. And so one of the key things here when we talk about policies is right now we have fixed your budget basically foundation in terms of the way that we budget. We want to talk with council over the coming weeks, and again, it'll probably be months over priorities so that we can really look at the long term in terms of what you want at a high level to be. But then we have to then work with you on policy. Council dictates policy. You dictate bylaws, and through policy, you protect the municipality. And so one of the things that we felt that you need and that we thought there was some exposure to is making sure that we have good debt management policy, we have good reserve policy, and probably procurement policies that will protect the municipality, make sure we make the right decisions, but also enable us to do great things. With really good debt policy, good reserve policy, and procurement policy, municipalities come alive because it takes away the fear of spending, but also protects the town from doing the wrong spending. So that's how we want to set you guys up for success over the, again, short and the long term. Now, I'll just let you read all those numbers, and then I'm just kidding. There's a lot of numbers on there, and I don't like to just go over numbers, but again, from a transparency perspective, this is the way we present budgets. We feel it's important to provide the numbers because your public may want to see them and you may have questions about them, and so the numbers are there. And this ties to the things that have gone up and that have gone down, but what's probably more important is we have explanations for those numbers on the second slide. Ed, did you want to speak to this, or do you want me to take them through this? I'll just, because Ed's the one who knows the real detail of this part.
Thanks, Tim. I think you're doing a great job.
Okay, so that just tells me to keep going. Okay, thanks, Ed. So the big thing, this is your finance department. So one of the things, oh, go ahead,
I just have
Counselor.
a question.
You betcha.
For the percent change, where
Yeah.
it says like in red or there's in green, there's plus and minuses.
Yeah.
Can you just explain that quickly?
Sure.
Thank you.
So basically, so I have to say this, Ed, correct if I'm wrong, but I think there's some color incorrectness on here. We talked about this earlier today.
Yeah, it got caught too late, but there's
Yeah,
a couple
okay.
that.
So everything that's a
the other way.
plus, yeah, it's an increase. So I apologize for that. Yeah, we talked about this earlier today, and I thought we'd get it fixed, but that's okay. But yeah, pluses should be green and minuses should be red. So great catch though. Thank you. So your finance department, one of the big things that we wanted to state about finance is we do think that there's something that needs to be changed here. So typically when you have a finance department, it's usually the finance department, basically the staff and the work that's going to be done. What you have here, and it's not that it's abnormal, some municipalities do this, but I wouldn't recommend it, is that your finance department currently also holds all your requisitions, holds the taxes collected, holds everything. So it basically inflates the finance department to look like, man, these guys are making a lot of money, right? But the reality is that's corporate money. So our recommendation that, and Ed and I went over this today, is that by the time we finalize and finish this budget, we want to fix this for you. So what we're going to be recommending is that we remove the property taxes, the education requisitions, and everything else, and we put it in what we call a virtual department. That would allow you to look at the finance department itself and get a better idea of what this budget actually means. And so I just want to make sure I gave you that caveat before we started. Now, in this area, property taxes basically combined, residential is down, but your commercial is down, but your again, rate reductions enabled by $1 million in departmental savings from across the organization. So because we had so many savings across the organization, we're able to reduce your taxes from a net perspective. But we did see significant assessment growth in your municipality. And so we're seeing two things. We're seeing a reduction in taxes due to the reductions in expenditures, but we're also seeing a positive component of taxes because you're seeing real growth, which is very exciting for the municipality. So return on investments, one of the things, because you have reasonable amount of money in reserves, and so if you look on the balance sheet of a municipality, you'll have this thing called reserves. That is equivalent to basically, now there's a little bit of math here that's funky, but essentially if you look at your bank account on the balance sheet, your bank account cash is typically close to the amount that you have in reserves. Because with the amount, that money gets invested. And that's a positive opportunity for municipalities to generate investment income. And so we have about $147,000 of investment income that's going to be coming into this area, and that's a positive over and above from last year that we accounted for. Consulting and legal, this is where we made some subtractions. Because just looking at some areas in terms of opportunity to reduce some consulting costs, so that was done here. And then salaries is up by $135,000 again, and this is just simply corrections to the budget, so right-sizing your budget to what you actually had from an employee perspective, and so hopefully that helps. There is an opportunity here, I believe, in contracted services as well. Where I believe there's an opportunity where we have been asked for the possibility of providing with CFO services. So that is one of the opportunities that we have in consulting as well within this budget, and so we're looking at that. Software maintenance is down $36,000. Again, so your total expenditures basically is up 13.4%, but again, because of the changes primarily in salaries. From the reserve contributions, again, the lodge requisitions, these are just basically requisitions from lodge, from education, those types of things. It's important to note this, that we have no control over these. So this is basically a flow through. And one of the things that's very important that we would be proposing is that we want to put some education out for your public to understand when they get their tax bill, there's municipal taxes, but then there's also education and lodge, right? So that the tax bill is not all coming from municipal taxes. So that is your finance department. Any questions about finance? No? Okay. Go for it.
Sorry, just for the mayor, if you need to ask a question, just say something because we can't see you on the screen.
Is he still here?
Sorry, I'm still here. Does it work if I click the little hand icon? Does it show anything on the screen?
No, it doesn't. No.
So we can't see you right now until the presentation's over, so just speak up. Mr. Mayor, I'll just say, do you have any questions, Mr. Mayor?
Okay, sounds good. I don't have any right now.
Okay.
Yeah, no. Continue on.
Thank you. Okay, next one is council, and this is where the magic happens, and I mean that sincerely. So this is basically the council costs, and as something just happened. I saw, there we go. So basically the total expenditures here, this reflects the mayor's honorarium, deputy mayor honorarium, and then council honorarium. And so this is your meeting fees. And again, there's the details below. And again, this overall budget had a decrease again when compared to actuals, and covers off your election costs, covers off conferences, covers off again meetings and meals, those types of things. Again, this, and again, I just want to say, looking at this budget from a benchmark perspective, pretty reasonable budget. Nothing, this is a very reasonable cost compared to many municipalities of your size. And so nothing to me that really stood out from a concerning perspective here. So any questions about the council budget at all? No? Okay. Moving along, planning and development. This is an area where there was significant change. And as you can see, the primary change is in two areas. One is under provincial grants on the revenue side. You'll see a grant of $449,000 there. And then you'll see under consultant professional fees, a reduction of approximately, again, just over $1 million. This was an area that we saw an opportunity when we compared to actuals and looking at your activity, an opportunity to reduce consulting fees. But at the same time, there was a project that was tied to a provincial grant that was also tied to staffing. And so the equal amount came out. If we get the grant, we do the project. But it was something that my understanding, and Ed, you may have more information on this, but it was something that was deemed as not feasible to be done this year. Ed, any comments on the actuals on this budget? Because you have more detail on this one.
Sure, yeah, thanks, Tim. You're right, the consulting fees went down. The team looked at them and your team administration, and they decided to pare it down to what they thought they could actually spend and what they could achieve. If there's anything that does get added, it will be grant funded, so that would come out as a budget adjustment, but would have a net zero impact. That makes sense.
Thanks, Ed.
Yeah.
Any other comments, Ed? Maybe if you could, Ed, I'm not sure. It seems kind of low to me. Could you speak a little bit louder into the microphone as well? Any other comments on this
Okay.
budget from a detail perspective?
From the detail perspective, no, I think you've covered it pretty well. I go into great reams of detail, but I might bore you all. But in general, yeah, you're seeing this is probably the one area where we saw the biggest savings under the consulting and miscellaneous contracted services. Your reserve draw decreased as well, so that kind of your revenue from the grant was going into reserve, so it kind of offset itself. So that when we took away the revenue piece, we took the reserve out as well, so that basically was a net zero on that. But other than that, I think you've covered it pretty well, Tim.
One of the things I think it's really important to note as well, one of the big things that happens with budgets sometimes is when we overstate budgets and we have money in for projects or money in for consulting, we also set expectations. And that means, we expect things to get done. And so I'm very serious about that as an administrator. When I put something in a budget, and for my council, we better get it done. But what we found with the budgets that you had in the past, because again, Viv inherited them and this administration inherited them, that there was a lot of what I would call optimism in those budgets. But realistically, there's only so many hours in a day. There was no way they could get all the work done that was basically proposed. So one of the things that we wanted to do was be conservative in our approach, but also make sure that we let council know if there are things that you want to get done, you have to just tell us, and we will work towards getting those things done. The other key thing too is that this is right-sizing the budget down, but also puts $2 million into reserves. You have reserves that if there was something that was emergent that became very important from a council priority perspective, it's not that we can't come back and make an operating budget amendment if there's something they wanted to have done. But we would ask that we make sure that we have the human resources and the time to get those things done, because again, there's nothing worse than setting an expectation and then letting you down as a council. So we want to make sure that we right-size these budgets, reduce the costs, reduce the projects, but also made sure that we could get the work done that we agreed that we were going to get done in this budget. So we're going to be accountable for this. Okay. Yep. Councillor Scott.
Thank you. So I have a question regarding the $0 for the provincial grant.
Yep.
It says that it accounts for 75% of this revenue decline, but then I thought that provincial grants weren't added to the budget.
part, could you repeat that, Councillor Scott? Sorry.
So you mentioned previously that grants were not added to the budget.
Yeah, so what we said is capital grants weren't included in the budget, so capital. So capital is different than operating. So there's operating grants and there's capital grants. And so one of the things that we took out is you had capital grants originally in your past budgets. We removed all those. Operating grants are a little bit different. So what'll happen is you sometimes will get an operating grant and then you put in the exact same amount for the expenditure. We made sure that we removed grants, but we also removed the expenditures because some of the grants, they weren't either received or we didn't have the time to do the work. If that makes sense. Ed, is there anything that you want to add to that?
Thanks, Tim. You're right. It's the capital grants that, any of the capital grants that fund capital projects are not included in the revenues. If they fund operations and if we know that they're going to be delivered, then they are in.
So I can still see that. I want to make sure that we get this perfectly right for you. So
Yeah, sorry, I
Continue.
forget that I've got to hand it back to you, Tim.
one of the things, Councillor Scott, that we can do as well is we have what we call flag item process. So if you have a question about this that we can't answer properly today, or you still want information, then just ask. We'll write that down and we'll come back to the next council meeting. We'll answer all the questions that you have.
Okay, because for me, if it is that we were adding the provincial grants to the budget,
Yeah.
this would mean that you would know what projects you want to do and what grants you're supposed to apply for, right?
So I think one of the very important things to note as well as this is that I typically don't put grants in that I'm applying for. I'm putting grants in that I have received and I have confirmation of. I would never recommend putting in grants into a budget that we're hoping to get, because that, again, that sets an expectation for things that we think we're going to get done. But then when we don't get the grant, then we basically have made a mistake in a sense in terms of expectations. And so what we typically will do is we'll have a budget, we'll apply for the grants. If we get the grants, then we'll come back for an operating budget amendment, or we apply for grants like literally a year ahead, so that we can make sure that we have confirmation that we're getting the grant, that we put it in the budget and we know that it's a go and we match the resources to it. That's the proper way of doing it.
Okay, that makes more sense to me.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
Councillor
you.
Scott. Ed, you had a comment?
Yeah, so in this case here, the revenue was actually decreased to factor in that constraint, right?
Yeah.
Not sure if we could get the work done, so we didn't have the grant or. the
There's this
expense
one
in.
here, yeah. One of the things that Ed just mentioned also, I want to make sure council's aware, because again, we're trying to support, questions moving forward, is it's also a bit dangerous sometimes to apply for grants if you don't have the human resources to actually do the work that you're getting the grant for. So I think this was one of those cases, Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, where we had looked at the grant and then realized we probably don't have the human resources to finish the work even if we got the grant. So we have to be careful, and again, that would require, and Viv, if you want to chime in at any time, you can as well. But that was our understanding when we went through this budget. Is that correct, Ed?
Yes, yes, it is. Thanks, Tim.
Ed's watching the hockey game while he's doing this. Thanks, Ed. Yeah,
I'm
and
just,
here's the thing.
slow on the mouse.
Okay, no problem. One of the things that's incredibly important is as we're going through this, don't hesitate to write some notes, whatever, ask me at the break. We will make sure we document all your questions and we will get back to you on anything that you ask. Okay. Moving on. Any other questions for planning and development before I move on? No? Okay. Okay, community services budget summary. Now, this is one of my favorites because I was the general manager of community and protective services for the city of Spruce Grove many years ago now. I was a bit of a younger guy back then, but learned a lot about recreation, fire, police, and FCSS and culture, and really enjoyed my time there, but I also saw the incredible value that came from this area. And so community services, the budget summary. And so again, a very important one, again, ties to things like arena, I'm assuming grass cutting, stuff like that is in this, your pools, hockey. This is the kind of stuff that to me makes memories. I love this kind of stuff. So a really great program. And yes, community service, you can pay me later for what I've just said. But anyway, all kidding aside, this budget, again, a very, very important budget, but again, something that adds a lot of value to the community. ICE rentals, we're looking at a $15,000 increase, again, consistently exceed budget, so this was simply a budget correction. Donations and leases, again, these were down according to, again, some of the actuals that we looked at. We do think that, again, we'll be returning to typical levels after the museum's 60th anniversary because there's lots of work going on there. Again, reserve draw 0. So again, 262 was drawn 25. We're not planning on using any reserves in this year's to offset any of the expenses. Again, from an expense perspective, again, total expenditures because of corrections down 9.4%. Doesn't mean that we're doing less, just simply means that we've corrected the budgets. Special programs down $137,000, and again, this is typical. Again, removing stuff related to the museum work. Again, the 60th anniversary, and again, we right-size your budget for building maintenance, and so it's not that we're going to be doing less maintenance. It's just simply that we're putting it to where your historical actuals are more reflective. Now, that said, I will say that you'll find when we get to capital, there are some projects in the capital budget now that are going to be looking at your arena and your pool in terms of maintenance, and so there's what we call operating maintenance and there's capital maintenance, two very different things. So operating maintenance is, the day-to-day painting, fixing up basically, wall cracks, things like that. Typical maintenance that we'll have in a building. Where capital maintenance is something that is a betterment to the project or the capital asset itself. So two very different things. And so though we're showing a reduction in building maintenance, we have in capital some significant projects that will hopefully upgrade your arena and your pool. So moving along. Key savings, equipment maintenance, consulting, again, is an area that we look from a savings perspective here. And again, reduce grants to organizations. And again, not that we're doing less in terms of granting to organizations. This, again, just meets our historical actuals. And so, again, to me, a pretty special area. Does a lot of great for the community. Do you have any questions about this area? No? Okay, fantastic.
Tim, just for clarification, it was the town's 60th anniversary, not the museum's.
Okay.
Yeah, that was.
Ed, you got me in trouble by putting
yeah,
museum.
I changed everything except for that one, apparently. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Thanks for the clarification. So again, it was the town 60th anniversary. May I ask, town of High Level is older than 60 years, isn't it? 60? That's it? I thought it was older than that. Okay. Interesting. It's a relatively young town. Community services, moving along, operations. And so operations is again, what I would call a core department. And when I say core, this is, again, where we do the essentials for a municipality. This is things like water, sewer, infrastructure, basically, and maintaining so people get clean water and so that we have both storm and sanitary sewer operations. This is also where your public works lies. And so, again, maintaining roads, taking care of sidewalks, filling potholes, snow removal, all those things that keeps a municipality running. Again, when I look at two essentials for any municipality, I like to think community services because it's something that's dear to me, but the real core of what we do and have to do every day to kind of keep a municipality moving, operations department is where the real work happens, basically. So this is a must-have department. So lots of cost here, but again, a lot of value in a department like this. Now, moving along, again, operations department, we have landing fees, and so this is basically the cost for, I think that would be your refuse. Lagoon dumping, again, down, again, no longer required. We now operate their own lagoon, the Denathan, so I'm not sure what that is exactly, but again, in terminal leases, reduced lease arrangements at the airport's terminal. So again, new budget. So again, revenues have changed here slightly. Your total expenditures here have gone up slightly. Now, one of the big things that is very important to note, we have a very significant situation happening that has resulted in significant cost increases in things like fuels and supplies and materials. Basically, the Iraq-American War has resulted in a very, very challenging situation from a fuels and basically supplies and goods materials perspective. Public Works departments use a lot of oil. We use a lot of supplies and materials. We buy a lot of gravel. This is the type of stuff that really really fluctuates with basically the oil and gas industry. And so there are significant challenges here. We feel this budget is strong from basically being able to be inflation kind of resilient for what's going on right now. But if we saw something significant over and above what we put in this budget, we do have reserve that we could come back for an operating budget amendment. So we feel safe with this budget. So utilities and gas salaries, again, is up slightly, again, supports the addition of 2 new Public Works employees. And the contributions for WCB. And again, we do have contracted building maintenance. And again, this was, again, looked at from a line-by-line perspective, and so right size for what we're actually spending. Notable line items, telephone is up significantly again. Professional development up significantly, but again, when we look at the percentage, it looks high, but it's not really that much in terms of dollars, in terms of getting your team properly trained. And again, residential collection is up from a solid waste contract perspective. And again, these are the types of things that are utility and they're flow through to the utility rates. And so any questions about Public Works operations? Nothing? Okay, moving on.
I have a question, sorry, Tim.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Who was that?
It's Mayor Lambert here. Just a question in regards to the lagoon dumping fees, because I'm not
Sure.
sure if it was in past conversation we had or presentation just in the last couple of weeks. Just in regards to, like, I know it was lowered to 75,000 for the 2026 budget compared to the 100,000. But if our actual was 46,500, are we just being conservative there? I guess because I know that in the past it was quite a bit higher because of the Denny thought they had utilized our lagoon facility quite well before they had built their own, but now that they have their own, I imagine that'll go down quite a bit. So is that still a little bit too high, or are we just trying to be conservative there?
Ed, you did the detailed work on this. Could you answer the mayor's question, please?
Yeah, honestly, we did look at it and we reduced it. We didn't want to go down too far. But if you feel it can go down farther, then we can make that adjustment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the actual numbers compared to
Yeah,
what they did in the past, or what, like, if you look at it line by line,
yeah,
what they would have contributed to
Yes.
it. So I don't know that exactly, but just had the question there.
yeah.
If,
It was basically, we looked at the run rates. What I also tried to do was not to capture outliers, and sometimes I might have caught an outlier in that one, where there's just one year. You want to make a big decision over 1 year.
Yeah, okay. And then next question I had was with the residential collection contract, just going from 144 to 177. Did we raise collection fees for that adjustment?
Through your worship, not yet, but this is an area that we are going to look into.
Okay, thank you.
one of the things I maybe wanted to state too, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, one of the things that we talked a lot about was our conservatism on the revenue side. We also employ the same conservatism on the expenditure side. And so we're much more confident in having a bit too much just in case for contracts and things that change, like dumping, that we're maybe not sure of, than been going too low and then getting caught because we don't have enough in the budget, Mr. Mayor. So that might be one of the rationale behind that as well. But we like to tighten things up, and if you feel that we should look at this a little bit further, we certainly will.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I just was concerned about there is still quite a difference. I mean, it's less than half what we budgeted before, and
Okay.
now it's only going down by a quarter. So, like I said, I mean, maybe just look at some actuals of what, I don't know if the stats or the data is there to say exactly what they did contribute to in the past. But that might give us better information if that data is available.
Thank you. Ed, if you might take a note of that, I think we should talk about that going forward as we finalize the budget, okay? Next budget, corporate services. Corporate services again. Yep, I've worked in all of them. I was a long-term corporate services employee for a long time, working in well, again, your corporate services doesn't have central finance. The one that I worked in did, but corporate services ties to a number of departments. Usually, this is where we have things like legal, HR, fleet. Basically the general types of things that occur. RCMP's in here, so this is a pretty general kind of an area. But one that we feel, as we start to improve your budget, we think we could break this a little bit more for transparency, but we didn't want to change too much for you as we went forward. So corporate services in this miscellaneous revenue is again to reflect recent collection trends. Animal licenses, again, so bylaws in here, so that's been reduced slightly. And again, municipal fines, this is where we have our bylaw. So basically municipal fines are up, again, according to actuals and whatnot. This is also where we have the RCMP contract, and this is something that's essentially kind of out of our control. RCMP contracts are up across the country, so every municipality is seeing an increase from that perspective. We see salaries decrease in this area. Again, nothing's happening here, no staff are leaving, just simply budgets are being aligned to our actual spending levels. And then telephone costs, same thing. Basically, budget is set closer to our recent uses passage, and again, so we've reset this budget. So from a savings and corrections perspective, again, where we did see an opportunity is our consultant audit and legal cost. And so again, this is now coordinated through the finance department. So that was actually moved out of this department. So it's been added into the finance department. So no savings here, just simply a reallocation. Software maintenance, again, set for more recent use. And again, no reserve transfers. And so a fairly static budget here, but again, significant decreases in revenue because of the conservatism that we want to employ. We found that past budgets were a little bit, maybe a little bit more, not as conservative as what we put here. They were overstated to an extent. So any questions about corporate services?
Yes, for the three under revenue, the animal licensing and the
Yep.
fines,
Yep.
what is the rationale for the budget? Seeing that the 2025 actual was, say, for example, 700, but we're budgeting 5,000 for this year.
Ed, so we see the actual 700 for provincial municipal fines, but we have 5,000. What is the rationale there?
It's actually, I think he's on mute, but it's actually 2,000, not 5,000.
No,
Yeah, I'll have to, I
Talking
do have the
about-
detail from the chief. I'd have to dig into that a little bit more. If you don't mind, I'll dig into that detail
Okay.
and
Well-
get that.
Councillor Scott will put it as a flagged item and we'll get back to you on it.
So not only that, for the municipal fines, it's 700 for last year, but then we're at 5,000.
Yep.
For animal licensing, it's 680 last year, and we're at 2,000 for
Yeah.
the budget. So if you could look into those, and then why did we go down to 750 for the other revenues as opposed to the 1,000 plus that we actually used last year?
Ed's developed the detailed budgets. I'm going to answer the question, but I thought I'd give
Yeah,
Ed the chance before.
Let me, I'll have to go back to the chief's notes, but let me see what we've got here.
Okay. One of the things, having had some experience with fines in my past, when it comes down to provincial municipal fines, there's been a significant decrease in things like photo radar and all those types of fines that typically we would have. I happen to know that there's been discussion from a legislation perspective of the possibility of some of those fines coming back. And so some municipalities have started to reset basically their fines in their revenues. I don't know if that's the reason here though. I have to talk with Ed. So Councillor Scott will put it as a flagged item. And again, like we said tonight, it's about questions and we'll get back to you. So I apologize. Thank you. Fire services,
Sorry, I have a question as well, Tim, just on the same under revenue, actually. Just for clarification, not necessarily a question. But when it comes to like vehicle parts, supplies, fuel and oil, is that related to the peace officer vehicle, or what is that related to?
vehicle parts and supplies. So So again, Ed has the detail in front of him, but from my experience, if bylaw is included in corporate services, typically bylaw does have rolling stock, meaning it'll have vehicles, it'll have certain pieces of apparatus. And if those are in here, then there would be certainly supplies, materials related to fuels, oils, and filters and things like that. Ed, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we're talking about fire, right?
Nope, we're in corporate services, so the bylaw.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it would be, yeah, if you have vehicles, that sort of thing.
Bylaws included in the corporate services department, and so we do have vehicles within this budget, correct, Ed? You'd have the detail.
Yeah.
Yes, oh, Romer, yeah. So, okay, so Romer just answered, Mr. Mayor. There's 2 CPO vehicles within this budget, and so that would include fuels, road oil or oil change type stuff, filters, and typical types of maintenance supplies for vehicles.
Does this also include the other town-owned vehicles that are used by town staff, I suppose? Not necessarily public works, but just ones at the town office? 'Cause I know there's a couple SUVs and I believe a van. Is that
Roma?
included in this as well?
Use your microphone.
Mr. Mayor, the other 2 vehicles are, I think, in the general administration or finance department
Oh, okay.
budget. Yep.
Thanks, Romer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pain's almost over. Fire services. Okay. Fire services, again, was under my portfolio when I was at Strathcona County. We ran a full integrated fire department, so I know a little bit about this stuff. So again, very important area in relationship to service for the municipality. So again, salaries and wages. We see the pluses and minuses here. I'll go to the detail. If you don't have any questions about the detail, we can come back to this. But again, from a fire response perspective, we see an increase here, and from a revenue perspective, of overall about 1.1%. Typically fire response, again, right sizing to our actuals, reflecting sustained out-of-town deployment activity, so it depends on fire season. And my experience with this, and again, my esteemed colleague may correct me if I'm wrong, but fire, we just don't know what we don't know. Some years we have really, really difficult years. Some years we don't. It all depends on weather and a number of other challenging situations that occur. So again, we do our best to budget here accurately, but this is an area that can fluctuate significantly dependent on activity. Again, fire contracted revenue budgeted conservatively, so we've looked at again reducing the revenues there, and again from a provincial grant perspective, we're looking at I think the same grant. And there are some lease and revenue losses in this area, again, just simply because of lack of activity. From a salaries perspective, again, reflects a fully staffed fire team. So we are moving this budget up. I think that there was some what we call slippage in originally put in this budget, meaning that it wasn't staffed fully and it wasn't budgeted for a full staff complement, where now we're staffing it at its full complement and we're reflecting that in the budget. Again, there's a housing lease of $17,000 that has been included in this budget, and again, a special program for a fire study. So this is going to be included from a disaster service perspective, and again, something that's pretty important. So there's a study included in this budget. So savings and corrections, again, equipment replacement has been reduced, again, simply because we're right-sizing the budget. Contracted maintenance has been changed as well. Fire hall carried a $65,000 budget against the actuals. And again, we reflected this closer to recent spending of $20,000 a year. And again, reserve draws are at 0 for this. Again, there was some reserves drawn for fire support in 2025, but again, we never know if this is a recurring requirement. And again, the money's there. It's in reserve if required, but we're not going to budget for it because we don't know what we don't know. And again, the fire chief might want to make some comments to this, but did I kind of capture it all?
Yeah, so just on the firefighter housing lease, to clarify that, that's a cost that has been carried in previous years. It's for the work experience program firefighters, and it's charged back to them at cost recovery. It was previously in a different line for contracted services, so it's been moved to its own line. And then the reserve draw, from my understanding, there was money budgeted to be taken out of reserves to support operations in 2025. That wasn't used, and that's not something we're including in this year's budget or future budgets going forward.
One of the things for council's awareness that, again, our method of budgeting, we never put budgeted reserve transfers in unless we know that we're going to use them or we have a good reason for them. And so the budgets are still there. It doesn't mean that the reserves aren't there. And it takes nothing more than a resolution of council to use those. So if something occurs, we can move money into the budget quickly, but we don't want to budget for it. And then, it causes basically reporting issues and accountability issues by having the money there. So something that we corrected for you.
The fire study, can someone explain what the study is for?
I'm sure that somebody can, and he's to my right.
Thank you.
My understanding is that that was a request of the previous council to conduct a fire study, and it hadn't been done in the last term, and is something that's again planned for this coming year, but didn't get accomplished in past. I can't speak to why.
You know the context of the fire study itself? Or the firewall?
Service, yes, like
A service study?
Service study, yes,
So in-town service study.
for the fire department.
Okay,
like
understood.
The
Thank you.
departments, yes.
Any additional questions on fire?
I do have one question.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Just with the special program, because we had budgeted 135,000 last year and only spent 5,000. What happened? Do we have, like, I guess this is just for administration. Do we know what's going on? What wasn't completed within that $135,000 or 130, I guess, whatever's left over?
Through Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, could
Through-
you?
yeah.
Oh,
Sorry, through your worship, we can take this back and provide an answer.
well, can I
Yeah,
get the
I'm
question again,
assuming
just
we
so I
had-
know?
There was just looking at under expenditures for special programs. So last year we had budgeted $135,000 for a special program, only spent 5,550. And so I'm assuming whatever project there was not completed. So I guess it's one of those things where, we are looking at, a surplus here, but essentially is it the stuff that we should have done and just didn't, or like, I guess, what are we missing here for moving forward? Because now we're doing another special program with the study, which I'm wondering, was it also included in that 135? And there was two different programs there, I guess, is what I'm looking for.
It's a fair question. Ed, do you have any detail on, or Romer? Perfect.
Mr. Mayor, this is the AHIMT, and we are still trying to figure out the cost of the program. The problem that happened is we have been receiving the funds, but there's not a lot of activities that we are doing for that program, and we are under we are reconciling it with the AHIMT people to make sure how much money we have to return to them. All
Right.
hazards incident
could you ex-
management.
Okay, I was going to say, can you explain the acronym?
I think
Okay.
to clarify what we're talking about here, when I looked at the past year's budget, there was two special program lines. One was under emergency management, one was under fire service. They've been consolidated in this budget. The fire service portion of it was $75,000. The remainder was that Alberta All Hazard Incident Management Team. So they've been consolidated. There were two different projects. I know from what I've seen, no money was spent towards a fire study, so I'd suggest the $5,000 and change was probably expenses related to the incident management team.
Through your worship, thank you for that. $75,000 was supposed to go towards a fire services review. That's what the study is. I remember that now. Yes.
And that's a different review compared to the fire study, sorry? Those are two different things?
No, it's the same thing. It was supposed to be a fire services review, your worship. That previous council requested it.
Okay, so now, but we're still moving that forward. That's what the $75,000 is going forward.
Correct.
There's two things I think in here, right? So we've got the budget of $75,000 for a fire study, And what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the $135,000 was in for a disaster services study, but that's been removed, I believe, correct? Ed? And
They were two different, so
they're two very different.
in past years' budgets, there was a separate budget for emergency management, one for fire services. In these line items, those two lines have been consolidated into one. That's what's happened.
And I think the point is that these are two very different types of studies. One is a fire study, I think, for basically fire services within the urban service area of high level, where a disaster services study would include things like, it's a completely different thing.
Sorry, just for clarification, the other one is a grant. It shouldn't be included in here at all.
Okay, that was actually my next question, was if it was a grant, just to see if there was a, like, do we have to, if we do receive it, do we have to pay it back if it wasn't completed?
Through your worship, we are reconciling it, and it looks like we're gonna have to send some money back because there are some parameters around this grant, and once we have more information, we can bring that back.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions for fire services? Okay. So overall, over a $1 million expenditure savings, that's equivalent to about 5.9%. Property tax reduction of over $337,000 and a contribution to reserves of over $2 million. And so from a financial fundamental perspective, I believe this is an incredibly strong budget that sets us up for future success. But again, it's a beginning, not an end. And so with that, that's the end of our operating budget presentation. Any additional questions or comments?
Just clapping my
Yeah.
hands.
I just want to say, I apologize, Tim. I had jumped ahead and I got ahead of myself and looked at the wrong slides when you were asking me questions.
You're watching the hockey game, Ed. Come on, tell the truth. It's all good.
I wish.
Break?
Yeah.
Okay, let's,
Um,
thanks very much. We'll take a break.
Hey Josh, what's the name of the company that Adam works for again? Central Mountain. Is it Central Mountain? Okay, so it
Sorry,
is
Adam who?
the one I was thinking of. Yeah, Ken West.
Yeah.
Somebody, but well, I've asked them. They put me on some lists, so I'm trying to do whatever I can. But that said, it's fine. I'm gonna be in a cab tomorrow and just sit in the back seat and read a book for 5 hours. It's crazy, but there's no other way. What's that?
Are we continuing soon?
Okay, so next we will move on to the capital budget for 2026. Go ahead.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, Council, or Mr. Mayor and Council, he is here virtually. Capital budget. Now, this is actually my favorite part of budgeting, and in some ways my favorite part of working in municipal government. Now, where we just finished the operating budget, as I mentioned before, provides incredible value each and every day. But it's also a little, in my opinion, less challenging than an operating budget in relationship to decision making, in relationship to planning, in relationship to executing, because the operating budget, for lack of a better way of putting it, is a bit of a rinse and repeat. So when we clear snow every year, we open up and maintain the ice in the hockey rink every year. We cut grass every year, so we have staffing, and so it's somewhat cyclical. Where capital budgeting is very different in that each project is a decision unto its own. And so sometimes capital budgeting and making decisions can be incredibly more challenging than the operating budget. The other part about capital is it's complex in terms of its funding. There's all kinds of different funding sources, including debt, grants, reserves, taxation funds, donations. It can be challenging, and so having a very strong fundamental understanding of funding and how to leverage funding and how to use it properly is really key and critical for capital budgeting success. This is an area that great things can happen for communities, but also it is an area where disasters have happened for communities from a financial perspective. And so this is an area where I say always extreme caution, but also extreme opportunity. Because again, if we do it right and we know what we're doing, we can make some great things happen for the town. So that said, I'm gonna get moving along into the presentation. So why capital planning? First, capital planning supports strategic goals. So if we say that we want to have a stronger economy, if we want to see a more safe community, if we want to support recreation or community culture or whatever it might be, often capital assets can make a difference. And they do that through things like fire halls, libraries, recreation facilities, even things like snow clearing equipment, fire trucks, whatever it might be. The key thing when we're looking at strategic goals is having a strong understanding that basically strategy is our vision for the community in the long term, and we have to have the tools, both human resource tools, financial tools, and then ultimately capital tools to make those things happen. The next part about capital is it is a foundation for quality of life, and so one of the big things that I often say to elected officials and to administrators that I'm working on priorities for is that when we're thinking about capital assets, consider it's nothing more than a conduit to service. So the fire truck is, again, providing safety during the day. Even when you're seeing somebody in a lawnmower out there, that grass cutting equipment is creating community beautification. The ice plant in the rink is creating recreation opportunities for kids and for figure skating and things like that. And so when we're thinking about capital assets, the thing that we really want to focus on from elected officials is what is it you deem important for the community? And then how do we tie capital assets to those things so we can make good decisions? The third part that's important from a capital planning perspective, very similar to the operating side, is evidence-based decision-making. And this is something that I'm going to really focus on over the coming weeks and months. And again, as we kind of look at the long-term focus for the community, what are we going to do and how are we going to make decisions based on evidence? Having good data, justifications, business cases, understanding our needs, the current state of our assets, what the public wants. There's just a ton of data that really provides good feedback and input into decision making around capital. And so we want to make sure that we are diligent and we are good about making decisions so we can get things done, but we also want to make sure that we also have the power of pause when it comes to capital. So taking time to make sure that we make good decisions. Capital is really a collaborative process. So one of the things I talk about is team environment. The best type of capital planning from my perspective, and I've been involved in capital planning. I was the chair of the capital planning committee at Strathcona County, and that was near my end of working at Strathcona County when I moved on to be a CAO. I'd been the chair of the capital planning committee, and what we did there is we actually created cross-functional teams within the municipality where we brought firefighters, police officers, recreation experts, public work experts, fleet experts. We put them in the same room, and we actually created what we called a capital committee. And in those meetings, we discussed, well, what's important? What do we want to do to serve council? I have to stress this part. Every good capital decision-making process always begins, though, with council. Without council's an understanding of what your priorities are, what your vision is for the community from a strategic perspective, what you feel the public truly wants, then a capital process is lacking. Because again, it really comes down to what you have for a vision for the community before we make those decisions. And I think though we have a good foundation to begin this process, I think we do, and Viv has talked to me a little bit about this, do lack maybe a little bit of a strong strategic plan. I think that is something that is a little bit of a gap that we have before we begin this process, so we want to be careful about making big decisions before we really know what you want for this community in the long term. But again, a team environment and really listening and hearing everybody across the whole organization is key to good capital planning and decision making. Transparent communication is obviously very important, and when I say transparent communication, we want to make sure that we're transparent with council. As you hopefully get a feel for the way that we present information, we make sure we present everything we can to council so that you can make good decisions, and that includes data, financial information, whatever it might be, because again, we take this very seriously because you're the decision makers and the leaders of the community. It also is important, though, to also understand what the public wants, and so sometimes there might be things, and I'd say this, like legacy type projects, bigger type of scale type things, when we want to make those types of decisions, on occasion it's worth getting public engagement. So basically either through surveys or through open houses, town halls, whatever it might be. I'm not saying that there's anything in your capital plan, in the 2026 budget that requires that, but it's something that is helpful if we get to that point. We want to look at the long-term capital plan for you. And then finally, from list to plan, again, lists are nothing more than lists, and they're nothing more than what we call bookshelf items unless you actually put real funding towards the plans. And so where councils sometimes get frustrated and administrations even get frustrated is because there's not a strong understanding of how to finance a capital plan properly. And that's proper use of debt, proper use of reserves, proper uses of grants, and making sure that your funding is in place before you move forward with the project. So by having projects with possible grants or maybe future funding coming in, I'm not a big fan of those types of capital plans. I like to actually have very concrete funding plans in place so that when councils say yes to a project, I can guarantee we can get it done. So that's going to be something that we're going to talk a little bit about this evening. So having a strong fundamental understanding of finance is key to good capital planning, just as it is for the operating budget side. Capital planning principles. So again, first, public safety first. So that's important. So public safety is obviously something we have to pay consideration to. And again, looking at, and when we think public safety, everybody thinks it's fire and policing. It's not necessarily that. Public safety can also mean having the right traffic lights in place, having fences around playgrounds. It can mean basically, do we have anything that could cause infrastructure failure? Is our water plant, in good shape to make sure that our water is clean and safe? And so public safety has a lot of different implications when it comes to capital budgets and plans. And so we want to make sure that we understand that as we look forward at your current current capital budget and your long-term plan. Maintenance is a priority. Again, when we look at and we have good maintenance plans, that means that capital assets last the test of time, and we avoid what's called infrastructure failure. And I have seen in many municipalities where they've got to the point of infrastructure failure on things. Either their ice plant in their arena wasn't taken care of, and it seized. Sometimes I've seen road failures, water infrastructure that breaks because it wasn't well maintained, and infinitely replacement of infrastructure is significantly more expensive than the maintenance of infrastructure. So as we start looking at your long-term capital plan, we want to ensure that we have good funding plans in place that maintains our assets as well as replaces and adds assets. So again, 3 really key streams there. One of the big things is sustainable growth for capital, and I think at some point we're going to want to probably take a deeper dive into your capital plan. I have to say we're pretty new to this with you, but you are a growing community, and I think that provides you with great opportunity, but also great challenge. And what I mean by great challenge, it means that we have to think about, well, what do we need for those residents of the future or the businesses of the future that are choosing to put their place in high level. There's a really important component of growth when it comes to capital assets. I think I explained this to you last time, but I want to mention it again, is that when it comes down to growing communities, we put in roads, water, and sewer infrastructure to attract residents and people to come to our communities, because we need those type of assets so that we can subdivide and build homes and things like that. But then what happens is the people come, and that means then they expect services. So we want to clear our roads. Maybe we want, we've hit thresholds on fire services because we have more people to take care of. Maybe our recreation facilities hit maximum. So what you have is basically this ripple effect of growth that also affects your capital plan, meaning that we have to add basically soft service capital to our plans. And so this is something I think that high level is going to have to look at in probably the 5 to 10 year window, because you are a growing community. So very important, but also risky. So this is where the balance comes. And so, there's safety infrastructure, there's growth infrastructure, then there's value add infrastructure. And so this is where capital planning becomes complex, difficult, and again, just simply a challenge. So it's something we want to look at. Again, capital planning principles is strategic benefit. So again, projects that deliver strategic value are actively sought out. Strategic value, for example, and I was part of this, is a grand example, is I worked for a place called Strathcona County, and there was a decision made to put water, sewer, and road infrastructure into a field where there happened to be pipelines that brought bitumen by them, because it went to the Esso refinery that was on the near west of Sherwood Park. And because of that, that was the beginnings of what's now called the industrial heartland. So that strategic decision to put in roads, water, and road and infrastructure into that area resulted in massive amounts of investment and assessment. So Strathcona County is now one of the wealthiest municipalities in all of North America. So that's one example, but I've also been part of many municipalities that have strategically looked at growing their residential base, their commercial base, industry base by, again, good infrastructure investment. But again, it's complex, but it can be very fruitful. So this is a strategic consideration council might want to think about in the long term. Another component of capital planning is obviously legislative alignment. There are things that we're mandated to take care of. We're mandated from a water perspective, and so we have to take care of water infrastructure, sewer infrastructure. We're mandated in terms of roads and things like that, so we have to take care of road infrastructure. So again, federal and provincial mandates must be met, and so we have to be careful to make sure that when we're looking at our capital plan, we take care of the things that legally we're obligated to take care of, and so that's a big consideration when we're looking at our long-term plans. And finally, again, you're probably kind of getting the gist of the way that I work. It always comes down to funding. Right? So a capital plan, a strategic plan, an operating budget are nothing more than bookshelf items unless we can fund things. So basically, if we can develop funding plans, then we can really make things happen. And so then basically a capital plan becomes an action plan. And that's really, from what I heard the last time I was here, this council would like to see, is to see us actually take action on things. But that means that we have to develop strong funding plans. Okay? So something to consider. Moving along, so the municipal capital budget equation. So one of the things that's really key here is when we're looking at the equation, on the right side, I've talked a lot about funding already, But on the left side, this is the beginning of considering priorities. So when we look at at a municipality, basically we have things like annual projects. We have to maintain our assets. We have to replace some of our equipment and vehicles. We have to replace and rehab things. And so again, rehab our equipment, rehab our buildings, make sure that our roof's not going to cave in because we haven't taken care of it, whatever it might be. We have things like growth. So we may be a growing community, and so we have to invest in new water, sewer, infrastructure, roads. I talked about that. And then we have that growth capital indirect that I mentioned. Once the people are here, we have to take care of those people. So new graders, fire halls, recreation facilities, whatever it might be. And so that's another consideration. The other thing is about value-added capital. And so value-added capital cannot be underestimated for its value. And when I talk about value-added capital, it's things like libraries, cultural facilities, recreation facilities, things that make communities special. So sometimes these things can be confusing. I've been involved in many multi-purpose rec facility builds in my time, gymnastics facilities builds in municipalities, and sometimes they're misunderstood by some of the public, but they create great value for communities. But it is, again, it's competing against the rest of the projects that are listed on there. And then finally, strategic capital, which I've already talked about. The key thing here from a council perspective is when we start looking at lists, you want to have a strong understanding of those different areas and understand that there's got to be a balance. And when I say balance, sometimes decision-making can be a bit confusing. And the reason why it's confusing is it really comes down to, well, what does the community want? Are things maintained? What makes our community special? The reality is, and this is where all the asset management professionals will be mad at me, but I've been doing this for a long time, is if we actually paid attention to all the asset management plans and what engineers said that we would do, we would never build a new fire hall, a recreation facility, a library, because all the money would go to those things. So you have to find a balance and find, through good evidence and data, where's the level of where we're maintaining our assets, where we're taking care of things, but we're also investing in vibrant community. And that's where making decisions becomes very challenging for a council. I can't stress this part enough. You need to be careful when you're actually making those decisions, because I've seen a lot of municipalities decide to build the shiny toy, but they didn't take care of the maintenance and the rehab of their assets, and then had infrastructure failures, and then have a very shiny toy, and it's a very, very embarrassing situation for the community, for the council, and ultimately the residents when those things happen. So we have to be very, very diligent in our evidence gathering and understanding the state of our assets before we make those decisions. And so moving on. So how this budget was built. So again, we looked at your inventory and your asset data. So there was business cases built and justifications. Again, we call it the Bloom classification, and so this is a bit of a priority setting framework that I've developed and I've used for many years over time. As I mentioned before, I was the chair of the Capital Budget Committee for Strathcona County, and we created a classification system that I developed there that is still used to this day. And of course, I stole it and called it the Bloom classification after I started my business. But all kidding aside, I was involved in some very, very big decisions. I mean, the capital budget for Strathcona County, it fluctuates between $150 to $250 million a year. So very, very intense decision making. A lot of really great things happen, but also, some things that shouldn't have happened. And so we're very careful about making sure we're very diligent about priorities when we're making decisions around capital. Again, contingency and escalation is something that's very important here. I can't stress this part enough. The big thing about great capital planning is also making sure that you put enough funding in that you're taking care of the things that you're not aware of. I have been involved in building builds. I've been involved in the procurement of roadway infrastructure, vehicles, wherever it might be. There's always price fluctuations, especially with a building build, where there's like change orders and things that you're not aware of. And so one of the things that we put and made sure of in this capital budget is that we're conservative in our pricing and we put in contingencies, which means that we shouldn't be coming back if projects are approved with capital budget amendments, meaning cost escalation. That's a tough thing to do for councils, and so we're very careful when we looked at the pricing that we had the right pricing for capital projects in this capital budget. Again, priority ranking was used. We talked about that already. Good funding analysis was used, and again, I'm going to talk about this a little bit, but it comes down to the big 5 or 6. And when I talk about the big 5 or 6, it comes down to understanding the state of your reserves, the the state of your grants, the state of your debentures and debt, and then basically all of the funding sources that come from the federal and provincial levels of government. And so if you're really good at understanding those things, it's what we can create what's called a funding pool. And what a lot of people don't understand about capital is that there's just about, for almost every capital project in a municipal budget, any source of funding can be used for anything. So debt doesn't have to be specific for a type of a project, or grant doesn't necessarily have to be specific. It basically just comes down to one pool, and you determine how you want to use those funds. Now, there are strategies around that. For example, as I mentioned before, I don't want to use debt for maintaining assets. I want to use debt for new things. I don't want to use grants for maintenance. I want to use grants for one-time items if I can. There's strategy around that, and again, reserves should be used for what they were originally intended for under your reserve policy. So again, this just comes down to again very smart and diligent practices around funding and financing. Now, we're at the beginning, in my opinion, for your capital planning, which is what I'm going to talk about in a few moments. You are you have good debt capacity, you have reasonable reserves in place, you have, as we mentioned before, from an operating budget perspective, growth and money going into reserve. We have an opportunity, but I can't stress it enough. You also have, you're not a large municipality, which means capital is expensive, and it doesn't take long to be able to basically use up all of your debt capacity or your reserves. And so we have to be very careful in our approach, okay? So something to consider. Now, the most important part of any good capital plan is making sure, as we're doing tonight, that we get the evidence and information into the right hands, which is basically the visionaries for the community, and that's you as council. So we want to treat tonight as a handoff, not as a decision-making vehicle. We want to get the information in your hands, let you consider it, percolate, ask questions, and then we come back and we'll start developing basically the capital plan in terms of what you want. Now, we have recommendations. I'm going to make strong recommendations. I'm going to admit that to you, which is what I think we should do going forward. But I'll be clear. My recommendations are going to be what I would call basically the fundamental type of capital that I, from my experience, know that we should be doing. So those are the kinds of things I'm going to make very strong recommendations on. But there are going to be some projects that we're going to want to step back and say, okay, what's really important to council? But I'm also going to tell you that there's going to be trade-offs, which means that we can't do everything. This capital plan, you have a very, very extensive capital list. I can guarantee you don't have enough money for everything that you want to do in your capital plan. It's like anything, and don't be discouraged by it. There isn't a capital plan that I haven't seen in municipal government where realistically we maybe have funding for 40%, maybe 50% of all the capital projects in a capital list, and just simply it just comes down to timing. It's not that we won't get them done, it's just a matter of when we want to get them done. So what we hope that we could do in maybe 2, 3, maybe even 5 years often takes 15, maybe even 20 years, often when it comes down to capital planning. And so the goal that we have here is not necessarily not getting projects done, it really comes down to when do we want to get them done. And so that's kind of what we want to leave with council tonight, is when we look at this list, what's really important in terms of like today, tomorrow, 5 years, 10 years. And so we'll get to that. But again, no decisions to be made tonight. So with that, there's some information in here about contingency development. So again, there are things that cause need for contingencies like frost, wildfire seasons, mobilization. I will tell you a story. I built a fire hall once in the town of Bruderheim. I was the CEO there. And I can still remember we chose the land area, and I had all the servicing going to that area. It was perfect place to choose, and we put $3.5 million in the budget for the fire hall, which was pretty exciting. This was 2006, 2007, so a long time ago. And then I got approval, and then they went to the land and they did what was called geo, and I wasn't aware of geo before. So they did some land samples, and they said, yeah, you can't build there. I was like, what do you mean we can't build there? And what they found was, true story, this is where they used to have the pit where they used to put the water for the fire department. Basically, but when they used to not have, like in the 20s or 30s, they actually had a pit with water, and people would actually have the buckets and go put out the fires that way. And so I thought it was quite ironic that I was trying to build a fire hall on the old fire pit. What that meant is there was no clay under the ground. So what they told me is that can't be built there, and I was looking at probably $400,000 or $500,000 of land cost to move the fire hall. Luckily, they did the geo about 100 feet the other way and said, okay, there's clay here. So I just had to move it. And so I actually got lucky. But I learned from that, do my homework before I choose where I was going to put a building. And I can't stress that enough. That's the kind of work that we have to do for you as we look forward to this capital project. We don't want to make mistakes. I've seen mistakes happen in many, many projects across Alberta. So something to consider. Priority setting, again, when it comes down to this, we're going to be going through these plans, but again, there's going to be things that are being essential, things that we have to do. So again, as I mentioned before, we don't want to risk infrastructure failure. We want to make sure that the municipality is safe. We want to make sure that critical services are maintained. But again, we don't want to put all of our money into those things and forget that there's other things that people want in the community that are value add or create a vibrant community. And so there's going to be a balance here. Capital planning is the art of balance and figuring out what's really, really important, but also what can we do that people want that maybe not, might not meet the sniff test in terms of like engineering or asset management, but still create a vibrant community. And like I said before, if we went with pure asset management, we would never build a library, a rec facility or cultural facilities. And so those are the kinds of things that we have to pay attention to as we start building capital plans. So something we'll pay attention to as we start building your plan for you. So the current capital budget, total 26 activity is 20.3 million. Now I'm going to put a big caveat on this. That is what I call a needs list, not necessarily a capital plan. And why I say that is this is what we want to do with you as a council this evening, was provide you with a needs list, and I'm going to show you a list with some highlights on it of projects that I will say I don't think we have the funding for or we're necessarily ready for from a priority perspective. We need more information from you as council about what's important and not important. If we went with the full needs list that you had previously, I will tell you this, we did the calculations, you would be at approximately 75% of your debt capacity and you would drain your reserves very quickly. So it isn't something that we can look at, but that doesn't mean that we can't get some great things done. So we're going to provide you with a list tonight with some ideas, and then we're going to work with you, and then I'll come back with a very strong recommendation in terms of capital plans that we need to do, okay? So this is going to be a fully funded plan. So again, we're not going to be basing our future capital plans on maybe getting grants or maybe utilizing reserves or monies that we'll be receiving in the future. It'll be a fully funded plan, which means that we can act on the capital projects that we choose. So that said, this is the list that we came up with. And the one that I'm going to pay attention to here is first your carry forwards. Now, I normally, when I'm presenting a capital budget, never present the carry forwards. But I'm going to do it for you because that $8.7 million number is a very big number. And the reason why that's important to note is as we start to get better at capital planning, we have to recognize that we need to start getting things done for you and as a council. And so I'm going to ask you, and again, I come from a very humble place, but I'm asking for your support on this, is that I believe the first thing we need to do is start to strengthen our procurement processes, strengthen our ability to get work done. Basically, if we say we're going to do things, we need to start moving on them. And so I think it's a bit remiss for us to go forward and approve a bunch of new projects until we actually show that we can get these projects that we've identified completed. And if we can't, and we don't have the funding, then those projects should actually then be put back in the mix with the rest of the projects and reprioritized. That would be my recommendation to you. So again, no decisions tonight, just simply, I want you to reflect on that list, and over the coming week or so, we're going to begin a dialogue about, are these still important, or is there a reason why they haven't got done? And we're going to be working with your admin team to figure this out, and then we're going to talk about, well, what should we get done? Because what we want to do is when we decide on a capital plan, literally, me and my team are going to work with your team to start getting the tender documents done and start getting your team aligned so we can actually get projects completed for you. But that means that the carry forward list has to be looked at. The second list that we're going to talk about is going to be now to 2026. Now, at the bottom there, you see that 11.585 number. So this was the list that Ed had worked on with your team. Now, my concern with that is that when we look at the 8.7, 11.58, when I did the math on this, if we did these 2 years of projects, we would again be at we would go over 50% of your debt capacity and we'd start draining your reserves. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but we better know that we're doing the right things and not doing it and looking at the context of the 5-year plan as well. So I feel as it stands right now, I want to hand this list off to you and I want us to reflect on on the decisions we're about to make. Now, I will say this, I've been doing this for a long time. I am fully prepared to come to this council, if you guys will let me, with a recommended plan for 2026. We'll include all the recommended projects and have them funded. But I'm also going to put a caveat on that I'm also going to remove a lot of these projects and then say these need to be looked at with council. We need some time together to determine what our priorities are, and we need to be able to tell you what we can truly fund before we do what I call any large-scale projects. Now, here's the reason why. If we choose to do, for example, the road rehab and the sanitary sewer, you see the two, 5.5 and the 1.2, and we do that on top of the carry forward projects we have. We also have the water treatment plant. If we do those, we have spent basically half the money that you have available for your entire capital plan going forward. So those are the kinds of decisions we need to make. And maybe they're important, but I want to know that. So we want to start thinking about, is the road rehab project for the 100th Ave, which I think is your main road, is it really our number one priority? And is it really important? And it might be. I have worked in communities where, and I want to make sure I point this out because I'll work with you on this, is that road rehab for projects like that are great, but what's really special about that is probably about beautification of your business area. There's a lot of things in this project that are not just simply concrete and gutters. There's a lot of things here about beautification of your downtown core. It's about creating some vibrancy in the community and possibly business attraction, could be strategic. I think we need to talk about that project. The other project on here that's very important is the water treatment sewer system upgrade. Well, you'll see there in 2026, and anything that isn't yellowed, I'm recommending that we do. So I'm going to just say that tonight. I'm making a strong recommendation that we move forward with this project. And so that $212,000 is a study that will determine whether that $5.7 million needs to be spent or not. So my understanding is there's still work to be done here in terms of whether that project is a valid project or not. So very important to spend that money so that we can get an expert's advice as to whether the water treatment system upgrade should be done or not. So I'd recommend that that one goes forward. Your lagoon cleaning, again, very important. Again, this is basic maintenance, got to get done. I would recommend that gets done. So that's recommended to go forward. Arena foundation repairs. Now, one of the things we heard is that you want to see some things done for the municipality that makes a difference from a vibrance perspective or whatever it might be. The arena upgrades, your recreation facilities are important for small communities. I know that because, again, I was a small town CEO in a few places. So we're recommending that the arena foundation repairs and the aquatic center upgrades get completed. And so we're going to recommend those are done, and we have developed funding plans for them. The fire pumper, we need to talk about, not because we don't think this is important, but because that 374 doesn't represent 374. It represents basically an expenditure of approximately $1 million, correct?
The overall total cost would be 1.8 million.
Right. So I never approve a project with, and again, it was submitted like this. I'd never approve a project unless I submit the full cost of the project to council. So that shouldn't be 374. It should be $1 million.
So the plan with the fire apparatus that are all in here is that because of supply chain issues with ordering fire apparatus, the intention was to seek pre-approval in 2026. This apparatus isn't going to land here until 2028.
Right.
At which point both of those apparatus that are being replaced with one would be due for replacement by the town's policies.
And totally in agreement with my esteemed colleague here is that, fire apparatus is critically important. But if we're going to move forward, we need to know that we have $1 million in the bank. We can't buy a third of a truck. So that's kind of the difference in the way that we would help fund this. So if we're going to make the decision, we're going to be recommending, that's the only reason why I highlighted this, we're going to recommend that the full $1 million is approved by council. We'll make sure that we have the funding in place for you, okay? So we are going to recommend that project go forward, but we want to recommend that we actually fund the full $1 million in this year, and then we bank the money and have it ready for future so we don't run into trouble. Now, the generator, I highlighted that because, again, I was curious because I haven't seen too many generators, but I hear that that's basically so that you can become a disaster services response area or something. Correct, Viv?
I'm not sure if that was the intent.
It's just to be able to, in an emergency, keep town hall running because it kind of works out to be the point of contact for everybody. So.
Okay. I'm going to ask if council will allow me, I'm going to call some colleagues and make sure, because that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for that. I'm gonna call some colleagues and see if this is a typical expenditure for a town hall. If it is, we move forward, but I would like some time to get evidence for you for this decision.
So when are we gonna be having discussions surrounding this? Because I understand what you're
Yep.
thinking, but me personally, I don't agree with the list that you're stating as to we don't do this one and we don't do that one.
Okay, no problem.
So I would
I
definitely-
want to make sure that I'm really clear about something here. This is council decisions, right? I am providing you with a list with my strong recommendations, but all I ever do is recommend. You ultimately make the
Because,
decisions.
like, for instance, here's a question.
Yeah, yeah.
So the treatment facility.
Yeah.
Right, we know that the project that we had that $5 million budgeted for was stopped. So wouldn't that item be removed and just the new $212,000 be there?
As I mentioned, that project is, my mind, I agree, is completely stopped. So the 212, so that's a carry forward, which means a carry forward has to be council by council for me to take it out of the list. Because it's already been approved by council, so a resolution of council has been made, so for me to take it out, I need a resolution to
Yeah,
take it
'cause
out.
we still haven't completed a study to
Yeah.
figure out which direction we're
Yeah.
going.
There's grant funds attached to the project.
Yep. Yep. So I want to make sure that I'm clear so that we're on the same page. The carry forward list are these projects already approved by council. So those as I stated before, if there are questions about whether they should be done or not, we need a resolution of council to counsel them. But I would agree, if they should be counseled, we should. But my understanding is we need the study to determine whether that should be done or not, correct? Right. Okay. So, just moving along, if I may, and again, we'll get to your questions in a
Tim,
moment,
just-
because again, it's
just a
pretty
question
valid.
on-
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just had a question on a similar topic as the deputy mayor was stating, but if we had talked about stopping that project in the past, I think we were waiting for some more information to come back
Yep.
on exactly the process of canceling the project. But, from what I understand, and maybe the CEO can correct me if I'm wrong, I thought we were told that this wasn't going to do anything for us, and if anything, it might even cost us more, or the cost benefit would not be even close to what we think it would be, in order for savings. So I guess if we already know that, why would we spend $212,000 to just? I don't understand that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Ed, who is online tonight, spent a week with your team last week, and this is the list they came up with, so I'd ask Ed to speak to that. But again, so if we have information that says that there's no benefit to this project, completely agreed that we should just remove it and cancel it. But again, this is the information we received from your administration. Viv?
Through your worship, we are looking at options to find the proper water treatment system that will address our water issues. And that's what that study is going to show us. And the hope here is to go back to the province and ask them to repurpose this grant and allow us to use the funds towards the proper water treatment system.
So if I could rephrase, though we know this project won't do anything for us, we do need something. Okay, so that 212 is to figure out what that something is. Okay, does that help, Mr. Mayor?
To an extent, I guess, that's not even put out to tender? Like, do we know for sure? I mean, the $212,000 just seems quite extensive for a study for the water treatment plant. I'm not
That's fair.
sure if there's other options that could be out there that we could, possibly even cut that in half.
Your thoughts?
Through your worship, yes, we will look into that and then report back to council.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just going down the list, and then again, I want to really open this up, but the annual rehab program, we are going to recommend go forward. The 2 vehicles we're recommending going forward, and the hazmat detection equipment replacement we're recommending going forward. Now, I want to be clear, as you look at the unyellowed list, they're relatively economical projects. They're ones that we have deemed are needed. The rest of the projects, the carry forward list and the ones in yellow, we agree. We need council's thoughts and direction. We want to hand this information off to you tonight, get your questions, your thoughts, hear what you like and what you don't like, and then we are going to make our strong recommendations as to what we should do. I would say this is the beginning of a change in our approach. But our approach is going to be evidence-based, and we're going to do our homework for you so that we can come back with a very strong capital plan and really get things done so that we don't end up with a carry-forward list where we just have projects sitting in purgatory, for lack of a better way of putting it. So with that, I think I would like to just stop now and hear what council has to say. Deputy Mayor, you said you didn't like the list. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are.
So, like, this is just my own personal thoughts. Like, so when it comes to the town hall generator, this is something that I've tried to assist with this a few times. I just think that maybe we should go a different direction and just cancel it altogether. I mean, we could bring in a trailer generator from a rental place as long as our building's set up to accept it. Totally fine, saving lots of money there.
Done.
I do feel like our road rehabilitation for 100th Ave is very important,
Okay.
as well as the sanitary sewer, as that sanitary sewer is in very poor state right now. So we need to address that. Yeah, like me and the mayor said there about the water treatment. I mean, I agree with the study to figure out what exactly it is that we need to finally correct this issue. The community park is, yes, it's a carryover project, and I would love to see it done. The costs have just ballooned to an astronomical number, so we need to figure out how we can space that project over multiple years, because we can't do like another $2.2 million.
This is what I need to hear is the history as to why these have been parked. Is it because the costs have escalated so much?
Well, there was a bunch of, I don't know the full story, but yes, to complete the completion costs have continued to escalate. So, the lagoon cleaning, obviously that needs to be done, but that's a large number. The foundation repairs and the aquatic center are very important. I understand what you were saying about the pumper. I do kind of appreciate that sort of technique in paying for it, as I mean, we could debenture the cost of the unit, but that's, then we're borrowing money, $2 million to replace a fire truck.
Yeah.
But, yeah, like I need some time to mull this whole list over, but like
Exactly.
off the top of my head, like those are the big ones that are sticking out for me. Like the biggest for me is the sewer sanitary on 100th Ave plus the rehabilitation, because if we're digging up 100th Ave to fix that sewer, then we might as well fix the road while we're there, right?
Go ahead, Viv.
Yeah, through your worship, for council's information, I would like to let you know that we have no records showing regular lagoon cleaning being done. And then I've been informed that the levels are high. So this is an area that I will ask that council consider prioritizing as well.
Sorry, we just did the lagoon cleaning, correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, about 2 years ago. And we did the spread technique where they were spreading it out on fields. I believe it was 2 years ago, hey?
Yeah, I believe it was the summer of 2024.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so I've been informed that that removes some of it, but not all of it, because there was no scanning done at the lagoon to look at the critical areas, and there's still a lot of stuff in there. And then prior to, you said 2024, prior to 2024, there are no records of regular maintenance being done at the lagoon. So it appears that this work hasn't been done for decades.
If I
Well, I
may.
guess for the lack of records, I suppose, but I don't know if that necessarily is true. I do agree with Deputy Mayor, like that definitely is an area that needs to be looked at, and it is one of the priority lists for the next, maybe hopefully this year. I know when we had the acting director of operations, we had some conversations in regards to some of the there was a few options that he had given us to look into that were relatively cost efficient compared to what's been done in the past, and something that would continue with and create longevity with the lagoon versus replacing it. Because I know with past council that was always a huge concern, was the cost to replace a lagoon. But I know we were given information that that wasn't necessarily the case, and we could probably continue on with it if we did took some other measures. Going back to the 100th Avenue. When we had this last conversation, was it when we talked about the budget? Was it a month ago, a couple weeks ago? We had talked about the fact that when we were looking at this project, we were obviously hoping that we would get STIP funding to pay for at least half of it. And, obviously now going forward, we're not going to, anticipate any funding for any projects, I guess, unless it's strictly grant related. But we had also mentioned with this project, there was a lot of things in there that I think even with past council, there was the understanding as well, if they're going to pay for half of it, we might as well put it in there. And a lot of that was related to, beautification and little things like that. So I would really like council to go over this project in a much finer detail to see exactly what we want, because I really don't see the $5.5 million in value for that upgrade. I know that's a huge thing that needs to be done. But for all the additional little things that were in there, I think we can get a lot better bang for our buck if we just take some of the stuff out. And people are going to be happy with a much smoother road to drive on than they are going to be about the black street lights. So I think we need to go through a little deeper dive on that, and before we make any decisions on approving that again or moving forward with anything. And that, even if it is to happen next year, that it is what it is. But if we can save a couple $1 million, I think that's what we need to do.
So if I may, this has been a bit of music to my ears, because I'll say this. When I was working with my team today, we said there's probably 3 key projects on here that we need to talk about further. And it was basically the water treatment system upgrade, so we could understand that better. It was the better understanding of the community park development, why it's been parked. And the one that we thought was an important project for consideration was the 100th Street upgrade. We turned it yellow at the last minute, and the reason why was because of the STIP granting. Because if we're not going to get that, we can make this project happen for you, but that's going to mean that we make a commitment to this project. It's a very expensive one, might provide great value to your community, but I think it needs extra consideration of council. As you said, Mr. Mayor, we need to understand, what do you want from this? What value does it provide? And if so, we can fund this one. This is one that we've got in our back pocket, a bit of a funding plan for this, but we can't depend on the grant necessarily. But if you make this commitment, it does take up a lot of the funding that you have in the future for your capital plan. It'd be a great project, but that does mean that other things aren't going to get done for a little while, because it's going to take up quite a bit of your debenture funding. Okay, but this is, again, we have time, but this is one where we wanted to kind of get some direction. We have pretty good direction on most of what we have on here, but that's the one that we really want to hear. If council wants to go forward, we'll figure this one out.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I think council needs to go back and look at the drawing board a little bit on this, maybe working with Myron on this, or working with the architects from Tetra Tech to see exactly what we want. Because I'm sure if this new council was to look at this project, there's probably a lot of things that they would end up changing, or wish that we could do differently. And then just to comment on the community park, I do agree with the deputy mayor that this might be something we need to stretch over a few years. It's unfortunate that this went out this way that it did, but again, just speaking on past council, this is even before my term. I think that there was, again, this hope that there was a lot of grants that were going to be paying for this project, and those grants never came through. So I guess we definitely shouldn't be spending money that we don't have, and hopefully that with this new budget process, that'll change things here.
One of the problematic issues you've had with your past capital planning, Mr. Mayor, is that just like this, you approve projects with the hope that you'd get grant funding. I would recommend from here on in, we don't approve any projects unless we have the funding. And that means that we don't end up with what I would call frustration, because we're not getting things done. And if we can do this properly, then whatever we choose to do, and once we come back with a plan over the coming weeks, we will commit to getting these projects done for you as your administration. But we have to develop funding plans and come up with realistic, basically, funding plans to make them happen.
Yes, so separate and apart from all of this, based on the projects that we want to move forward with, do we also, for Viv, need to discuss with you the staffing capacity to follow through with these projects? Because yes, we may discuss the financial aspect of it, but if we don't have the manpower to go through it, then we might start and stop, or even just discard it.
Yes, and that's the purpose of going through this exercise. So we will be looking at financial and human capacity. And I believe the Director of Community Services has something to add regarding the community park.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to add towards the community park was the previous director had actually project managed. So we were working with some consultants, and then the previous director decided to project manage the project herself. So there was some discrepancies in the plan where we had the washroom was placed in the wrong spot. There was some concrete poured that was not the accurate size. So the gazebo that we had ordered does not fit on the concrete that is there. And then after we got WSP to come, the consultants to like a walkabout, all the grading is not accurate to the plan that we had. So there's been a few other issues other than funding that we've kind of realized, so.
And that brought the project up to the amount that you see up there now.
That gets very expensive. Okay. Okay. So, so again, we're again, this is exactly the kind of conversation we're hoping for this evening. It's giving us the kind of information that we need to be able to look at and to come back with basically some recommendations. Like I said, from our perspective, we see three key things up here. Again, the community park, the water system upgrade, and then the 100th Ave road rehab. Our job is to come back with realistic plans. The rest of this capital plan, from our perspective, is realistic. There's a lot of bang for your buck in a lot of these little projects. There's a lot of good happening here, but we do have, again, the bigger level projects that can make a difference. And so it really comes down to whether the 100th Ave project is really a go or not. And from the human resource perspective that Councillor Scott brought up, is one of the things that we want to look at, and we've talked about with our team and with yours, is making sure that if we commit to these, we can commit to getting the tender documents done, have project management in place, and get these projects completed so we don't disappoint council anymore.
Is there an option to add a line item or a column that says how much money we've put into each project so far to see if, hey, we've spent this much money in this project, maybe we should continue it?
Through Mr. Mayor, typically I'm used to seeing that. It's called a work in progress column. So basically there should be an accounting, and Romer may know this. If not, we'll dig it up for him or with him. But there should be a work in progress accounting somewhere. We can definitely come back with that information for you, Councillor. Romer, you guys have that information?
Yes, for the carry forward projects, we do have the cost up to date, and we can add that to the when we go back to this capital project planning.
Okay. Well, so we wanted to again hand this off to you. We can spend as much time as you like looking at this, but we want to basically just get the information in your hands tonight. Give you some time to reflect on it. Get some dialogue going back and forth. We'll go back, develop the funding plans from what we heard tonight, and then get more information. But again, the key thing here is email. So sending us a message, sending us your thoughts, having a dialogue with each other, and then we need to come up with a firm plan in the coming weeks so that we can develop a funded plan and actually get to tender and get these projects completed and moving. Okay, fair. The component is, again, what we put together is a long-term capital plan for you. Now, there's a lot of projects in here. Now, they call these a project plan. I never call these a plan myself. I call this a needs list. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of projects in here, but I can guarantee you we do not have enough funding for all the projects on this list. We probably have enough funding for maybe at best a quarter of the projects on these lists. So these are lists that have come from your engineering plans, come from your staff, come from all different kinds of master plans. But realistically, when you look at your funding ability, you maybe have the ability to fund maybe a quarter of these projects. And so that's the challenge when it comes down to capital planning from council. I mean, it can be a bit of a soul-sapping exercise because we see these lists and we want to see a lot of things happen. But realistically, The capital budget process annually is what solves it. And so I never recommend to any council to go in and try and solve a 5-year list and come up with a funded plan. It's just not realistic. There's nothing wrong with having a list up there, but the job of a councilor is to annually decide what is actually going to get completed. And so these are here. If there's things that you look at over the next week and say, we think these maybe should move forward, we can discuss that. But I can't stress enough, we have to come up with a funded plan for 2026. And we hope to do that very shortly. Okay. Questions? Okay. Yep. So consideration and our path forward. Oh, Mr. Mayor?
Yes. Can you go back to that last slide? I don't have a copy of that. Just looking at the Rescue 2 medical unit, can you get some clarification on what that would be?
So that project is actually combining 3 pieces of equipment into one. So that's eliminating the current Rescue 2, one of the brush trucks, and the air supply trailer that we currently have, and combining them into a single unit. And 2 of the 3 under the town's current asset replacement process would be coming due anyway. So it's attempting to find efficiency to combine a larger number of the fleet into a single unit to save in long-term financing and debt.
Do we now, if we were, I'm assuming we'd be selling those other pieces of equipment, do we have a rough idea what we would potentially get to recover some of the cost?
I mean, you're looking at market conditions at the time, but yeah, I believe, in the range of $70,000 to $80,000 would be a realistic cost recovery out of the 3 assets that would be being disposed of to be replaced with one.
Okay. And with the, where was it here? Sorry, it's very tiny on my iPad. Under the airport loader replacement, would that be, and this is for administration, would that be possibly eligible for ACAP funding?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, which one was the question?
Airport loader replacement. Would that be eligible under ACAP funding?
I'm trying to figure out which one you're looking at.
I'm looking at the same screen that you're sharing here. It's
Airport, yeah, airport design.
loader replacement, $147,500.
Okay.
Airport loader underneath motor grader, above equipment street sweeper.
So what's the specific question? I'm sorry. So the loader grader,
The question was, would that be eligible for ACAP funding?
are you aware of this ACAP funding? I'm not sure what that is exactly. Is that a grant funding program, Mr. Mayor? I know of all the grant programs. I'm not sure what that one is.
Yeah, it's a federal funding program for airports. That's a question for administration.
Do you have the answer?
If we can just look into that, because I mean that'll help obviously make our decision. If we can apply for some type of funding towards that, then
Sure.
It's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, we can do that. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. So as
I have a question regarding the, if you could go back, the Legion building abatement and removal. Can you explain that to me? Do we have a building that we're trying to get rid of?
Yep.
or-
Ed, you put this list together. Could you maybe answer the question, or Viv?
So our Legion building, that's just over here from us, it's got asbestos and some other issues in it as to why it's closed. So this is the cost for us to remove the asbestos.
So, yeah.
From what I understand, it was just an abatement, which would mean the removal of and, allowing the facility to be essentially used again.
Okay. Thank you.
But that's as far as I know. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's what it sounds like to me. Does Mayor, do you remember?
To be honest, I don't remember having a conversation about it. I would be interested to see more details to see, like, does that include, getting rid of the asbestos and then demolishing the building? Or, I mean, this is the first I'm hearing of it being reused.
Through your worship, it is my understanding that this is just to remove the black mold. I believe that the town purchased this building from the Legion when they closed, with the intent of doing the abatement afterwards.
Okay, yeah, I guess if we can just get more information on that to see exactly what it requires, because I don't know if there's much use for that building once the asbestos is removed or black mold, whatever it may be.
Okay. Ed, are you taking notes about all the questions? Okay. Okay, we'll check on that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. So moving along to considerations on the path forward again, the STIP granting for the 100th Ave, it does seem like it's a priority project. So we are going to look at what we need to do for that coming forward. LGFF and other allocations are something we have to look at. So we're going to do a full analysis on all of your long-term federal and provincial grants to see what we have from a funding pool perspective, to see what opportunities we have. We are going to, again, make sure that our reserves are in place and that we have a good reserve policy. So again, ties well to our long-term plans. The key thing that we want to make sure that we do is we develop a funding plan and a project list that does not allow us to have, again, the carry forward situation that we've been having. Basically, projects that sit in limbo and not get done. So if we commit to a project, we want to make sure that we have the procurement process in place, we get the tenders completed, we have project management in place, and the projects that council agrees to, we're going to start putting rubber on the road. So that is our goal with this project, this exercise right now, and that's why I know it's a bit soul sapping a bit, because again, we start looking at projects and say, well, we're going to have to cancel things and not get things done. It feels like, but I look at it as the opposite. We're actually looking at taking this long list of wants and dreams and turning it into reality by actually cutting the list down a little bit, but making it realistic in terms of what we can do. I will admit, I'm going to provide you with a pretty strong recommendation and cautions around basically our funding sources, but that will also set us up for success in that you can feel comfortable, and once you've said yes to a project, that we are safe financially, we're going to get the projects done, and it ties well to our long-term, basically, capital plans and helps you with your decision-making. It's the beginning of a process together, but it's one that, again, I've done with many other municipalities in my career and have done very successfully. So we're at a beginning, but hopefully we'll get to a good place here soon. But we really want to know, what are the key projects, and is there one or two that are really kind of what I call legacy projects or special projects for the community that we'd like to see done? And if you say that there are, we'll get them done. That's our goal. Okay. So questions? Okay. Mr. Mayor, any questions, thoughts? Because again, okay.
Sorry, just questions in general, is that what you're?
Yeah, just overall. So we finished the operating presentation. We finished the capital presentation. Again, like I said, our goal is to have a balanced budget and start getting things done. Any final comments or questions on the presentations?
I think you've answered most of my questions, and I think, again, if we, once council, I guess, has more time to fully go through this, I guess an hour or so before doesn't really give us much time to fully understand everything. But I mean, if we'll get, I think our questions together, but obviously it's tough to fully do that as well, considering a lot of this, I'm assuming, might change, just depending on what you come up with, I guess. So.
Through Mr. Mayor, I completely agree. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, tonight is in a sense a handoff to council. Not expecting decisions tonight. We have time, but certainly open to discussions over the coming weeks as to what you really want to see so we can solidify a plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it might be in council's interest here to maybe bring this back at our next council meeting, or depending on how much time we have between now and the committee of the whole, to go over this, and then council can really go into this on a deeper dive and decide where our priorities lie, and hopefully figure this out a little better.
And if I may, to maybe take some pressure off a bit, is operating is something we have to get approved, because again, we got to get to work, and again, it's somewhat easier. But capital is time. We can amend and adjust capital budgets throughout the year, though if we want to get, say, a project done, say for example this year, we do have to hit the construction season, so that's very important. But there is time from a decision making perspective, and we want to help you get this right for you, so we can do this short term and long term.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody have any more questions from council? No? Okay, So do we want to, are we just going to wait to discuss this until our next regular council meeting? Or are we going to set a special meeting for us to have these discussions?
Through your worship, I would recommend that we schedule a special meeting. I believe our next council meeting agenda is pretty full at the moment.
Okay,
So we just need to get some dates with the Bloom team and council, and then make sure we can schedule something.
okay. Yeah, no, I'm good with that. If you can get some dates together for us, that'd be great. And I guess that's everything on our list for the day. Does somebody want to move for adjournment? Counselor Markety?
And sorry, do we need to make a motion to just accept for information?
Oh, okay, yes. Sorry.
I'll
Counselor,
make that motion.
no, oh, Josh.
Go ahead.
Mayor, okay. All right, all in favor of the mayor's motion? Okay. Okay, now we're good? Caught up? Okay. All right, someone, I'll move to adjourn. That's it? That's all? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Good night, Mayor Lambert.
Thank you. Yeah, and I was on mute and I forgot, so I was trying to say